When one country's currency holds the status of the world's reserve currency, that country gets to enjoy a set of privileges, such as the ability to borrow more easily from other countries at a lower rate, or to pay less for imported goods. It also allows that country to have a larger impact on the global economy by providing liquidity and stability. This, of course, has long-term implications for investments and growth. Another benefit of having a reserve currency is that it enables trade between countries without exchanging currencies. For instance, if the US dollar is used as a reserve currency, which it is today, goods can be easily bought and sold in other countries simply by using dollar instead of exchanging multiple currencies. This reduces the cost of international trade and makes it easier for the US companies to do business across borders. A reserve currency status can also give a country more control over the global monetary system. This is because countries that use the US dollar as their reserve currency are often subject to US-based interest rate policies rather than those of other countries. This gives the US, whose dollar is the current world's reserve currency, more power to influence global markets and economic trends. But wait, there's another benefit: sanctions. Using the currency as a weapon to blacklist other countries or organizations by cutting them off the ability to transact in dollars. That's right, taking advantage of the currency's dominance, which would be the dollar in this case, to weaponize the global financial system like there are no consequences. But there are. As a country, having your currency as the world's reserve currency also has big downsides, which we will discuss later in this video. Welcome back, guys. My name is Vitaly with Moskalenko Brothers, and in today's episode, we will talk about the latest de-dollarization hysteria buzzing around us, causing panic and uncertainty. The end of the world wipes started when banks were collapsing in the United States a few weeks ago. Then the contagion spread to Europe, and today seems like everyone is talking about the end of the dollar as the world's most dominant currency, and that the long expected fall of the American empire is now finally here. There have been a lot of blanket statements on social media lately, such as that the stock market will crash, the bond market will get wiped out, real estate will cease to exist, and a crash like one we have never seen before is on the horizon.
You think is coming is a recession. What your crazy friends might say to you is coming is maybe a depression. You'd be mistaken. Those are lies. What is coming is a collapse of the dollar. You haven't had one of those. We've never experienced the collapse of the dollar, of the world's reserve currency. This will make us Venezuela. Make no mistake. If you want to be prepared, prepare yourself like people should have prepared in Venezuela. Soon, I don't know when, but it will happen overnight. Soon, everything will be collapsing and the banks will close and there will be chaos.
People spin these statements while providing little to no argument to support them, so to say that there have been a lot of noise lately would be an understatement. And that's what we'll attempt to do today in today's video. Eliminate the noise and bring clarity in the subject, so let's jump right in. History often creates an endless cycle of new ideas, experiences, and events, some that are experienced for the very first time by each generation. Even if something is brand new today, it's likely already been written in history somewhere along its timeline, waiting to be rediscovered or to happen again on a single momentous occasion. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the US dollar as the world's reserve currency has been the subject of many predictions of its downfall recently and over the years. We may be hearing about it for the first time, but it's nothing new. Despite these predictions, the dollar remained a dominant force in global finance. There have been numerous predictions throughout history that the US dollar would suffer a significant decline, such as during the 1970s when the US faced stagflation and the oil crisis. Many experts believe that the dollar's value would fall substantially, but the currency proved to be more resilient than expected. Similarly, after the global financial crisis of 2008, there were also predictions that the dollar would lose its status as the world's reserve currency in the aftermath of the crisis. Despite all these predictions, the US dollar has remained a powerful force in the global economy for many reasons, such as the stability of its economy, the liquidity and depth of its financial markets, the strength of its institutions, and the strong demand for dollars in global trade. While the US dollar's reign as the world's reserve currency may face challenges today and in the future, it's clear that it will not be easily displaced. replaced. Countries and investors across the world hold trillions of dollars in assets and trade heavily in dollars, indicating that the currency will continue to play a major role in the global financial system. In 2021, the US dollar accounted for 60% of officially reported foreign reserves globally. This is a decrease from its 71% share in 2000, but still significantly more than other currencies. The euro held 21% of the reserves, followed by the Japanese yen 6%, British pound 5%, and Chinese renminbi 2%. This demonstrates that despite the recent changes in the international monetary landscape, the dollar's role as a global reserve currency remains highly influential. I know some of you may say that people were making similar arguments in the United Kingdom before World War II, who perhaps argued that the pound, which was the world's reserve currency at the time, could never be replaced. Astonishingly enough, it eventually ceded its throne to an up-and-coming contender, the dollar. I'm not saying that the dollar will never be dethroned. If it will be nothing out of the norms of history. History has seen many different currencies come and go, so it's no surprise that the dollar may not always reign supreme. However, any big changes in its position would be unprecedented, yet still fall within the past patterns of currency evolution, and it certainly won't happen overnight as social media makes it seem. Before continuing, let's talk about what a world reserve currency is and how it comes to be. A reserve currency is a currency held by central banks and other major financial institutions around the world as a means of international exchanges and investments. The US dollar holds this title largely due to its strong and stable economy, deep liquidity in its markets, significant demand for dollar in global trade, and because it is backed by the United States government. After World War II, the United States emerged as the world's most dominant country economically since it was not involved in the war directly and suffered little destruction compared to other countries. The US did, however, get involved directly in 1941, declaring a war against Japan in response to the surprising attack of Pearl Harbor. Still, despite this involvement, the US economy prospered throughout the war and afterward. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement was made, which established the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. This agreement created a system in which foreign exchange rates were fixed to the US dollar, and other currencies can only be converted at a rate against it. Since then, the dollar has been widely accepted for international transactions, and its role as a world reserve currency is still strong today. Across the world, the US dollar is overwhelmingly the most commonly used currency for international trades. An estimate of its share of global trade invoices from 1999 to 2019 shows that it accounted for 96% of trade invoices in the Americas, 74% in Asia Pacific, and 79% in other regions. The only places where it is not dominant is Europe, where the euro is widely used instead. At the time when Bretton Woods Agreement was established, the dollar was linked to gold, but this link was severed in 1971 when President Nixon ended the convertibility of dollar into gold. After that, the dollar became a purely fiat currency, and its value has since been determined by economic and political forces as well as market conditions. The dollar was delinked from gold because the US government was struggling to maintain enough gold reserves to back its increasing money supply. This leads to the downside of having your currency as the world's reserve currency, because when a country holds that status, it is primarily responsible for the global economy and now has to supply enough of its currency to meet its global needs, since the demand to hold the currency in reserves from other countries increases. This can put a strain on the issuing country's supply, which can lead to inflation and devaluation of the dollar if steps are not taken to regulate the supply. In 1959, Robert Triffin, a professor at Yale University, informed the United States Congress that the Bretton Woods system of global currency was unsustainable. He argued that the US dollar could not remain the leading reserve currency without increasing the deficit. Tragically, his words proved to be true. In 1971, the Bretton Woods system fell apart, and the dollar had to be redefined as a pure fiat currency. When a country agrees to have its currency used as a reserve currency, it puts itself in a tough position. To keep the global economy functioning, the country may be required to inject a large amount of currency in circulation. And as I mentioned earlier, this can lead to higher inflation rates within the country itself. If the reserve currency becomes very popular compared to other currencies, its exchange rate will rise. While this may sound like a positive, it actually makes domestic exporting industries less competitive. This ultimately leads to a trade deficit for the currency issuing country, even if it benefits the world as a whole. On the other hand, if the reserve currency country chooses to focus on domestic monetary policy and not issue more currency, this can also have negative consequences. The world may become dissatisfied with the lack of currency injections, making it difficult to maintain a stable global economy. Overall, becoming a reserve currency country can be challenging as it involves balancing domestic and global financial needs. needs, which often results in a poor balance, leading to trade deficit. For example, the United States government has consistently run a trade deficit since 1976. For context, a trade deficit occurs when a country imports more goods and services than it exports. In other words, a trade deficit represents a situation where a country, which would be the United States in this case, is buying more from other countries than it is selling to them, which exposes the US to severe negatives like economic dependencies by becoming dependent on other countries for goods and services we need, which would make us vulnerable to supply disruption, price increases, and other economic shocks, which we experienced during COVID-19. Job losses are another negative. When a country imports more than it exports, it may result in job losses in domestic industries that compete with foreign imports, particularly those in manufacturing sectors. The US once dominated the manufacturing world, but we've now become dependent on imports from countries like China to meet our needs, while domestic manufacturing jobs have gone overseas. These are some of the negatives a reserve currency country can run into, which leads me to my next point. You've been hearing it a lot lately. China, being the second largest economy in the world, is vying for reserve currency status. While that may be true, one could argue the opposite. As an export-led economy, China would need to be careful to avoid falling into same traps as the United States. Even though they may want their currency, the yen, to become a global trade denomination out of the national pride, they wouldn't want their exports to become more expensive. This means that in order for all global trade to be settled in yen, China may need to export it abroad, something which is complicated by their strict capital controls. As I mentioned earlier, the Chinese yen accounts for about 2% of the global foreign exchange reserves, while the US dollar accounts for 60%. It would also require other countries to agree to this system and accept yen as a reserve currency. The dollar system has been very beneficial for China thus far, leading them to run a large trade surpluses year after year due in part to the dollar's strength. Whether China ultimately becomes a new reserve currency or not, it's clear that if countries' currencies does become a reserve currency, there are many risks involved. And it certainly doesn't happen overnight like social media tells you. As of today, there are no good alternatives to the US dollar, and the dollar is here to stay for the foreseeable future. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for your time as always, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay safe and stay informed.